Hello Afrocentric ones. Today we are taking a look at the Kingdom of Loango, which was an African state that was situated in what is now the western part of the Republic of Congo. Timeline from 1550 to 1883. The Kingdom of Loango was founded by the Bavili people probably around 1485, and it was one of the oldest and largest kingdoms of the region. From oral tradition sources, the Bavili migrated from the Ngunu kingdom to the coast during the 1300s. Early writers claim that the first ruler of the Loango kingdom was a king by the name of Gembe or Jimbe. The king of Loango ruled over a cluster of villages and territories around the province of Loango-Giri, but other districts lying further away were typically ruled by their own elite, and they followed their own rules but were overseen by officials from the court. In the central districts, each village was ruled by a noble who represented the king, and in addition, he had a substantial number of councillors also appointed by him. The king took a strong interest in the administration of justice, as we shall see later, and much of his time was spent in hearing cases and resolving disputes. It's interesting to note that from around the 17th century, a black Jewish community was to be found on the Loango coast. It was first mentioned in 1777, and this community, this black Jewish community, had no links with other Jewish communities elsewhere, and according to Wikipedia, has now disappeared. When it comes to economics, early Dutch commercial records indicate that Loango exported considerable copper to the European market during the 17th century. The Kingdom of Loango was also a major producer and exporter of cloth, as we shall see later from some of these old books, both to the interior and to the Portuguese also in Luanda, and thousands of meters of Loango cloth were exported in the early 17th century. In a book that was published in 1695 that talked about voyages to West Africa and the Atlantic islands off the coast of Africa by an author called Lemaire, who described the inhabitants, customs, and the places that he visited, he states, "In this country of Loango, there are many elephants and great store of ivory, which they willingly exchange for a little iron, so that for the nail of a sheep, be it never so small, they will give a whole elephant's tooth. The reason therefore is either because there grows no iron in that place, or else they have not the skill to get it out of the mines where it grows." In another page, the author also states, "The people in the Kingdom of Loango, they make a large quantity of cloth of the palm trees, whereof we made mention before, but these are lesser and yet very fine. They have great abundance of kine and of other cattle mentioned before. They are in religion pagans, and their apparel is after the fashion of the people of Congo. They maintain war with their neighbors, which are the Anziki and the inhabitants of Anzikana." And so the author of this book states that they worship what they please, and they reverenced the moon, and they reverenced the sun as well, and every man got to choose his own idol and worship it after his own pleasure. And according to this author, the people would easily embrace the Christian religion, for many of them have that dwell upon the borders of Congo. They have been converted to Christianity, and they have been instructed in the true religion, according to this author. So we see that the Kingdom of Loango was doing well politically, it was doing well even economically, and after several centuries of contact and trade with Europe, workshops specializing in carving export objects for the foreign trade were established along the Loango coast, and these workshops produced objects in wood, in soapstone, and ivory for sale to both Europeans and Africans. But the Kingdom of Loango started to decline in the 1800s, and in 1883 a treaty was acquired that ceded political authority to France. And thus, that wonderful Kingdom of Loango declined from its very high status. So let's take a look at another book that I came across. It was talking about the Kingdom of Loango and just giving us more details about it. This book is called A Description of the Coasts, and it talks about a lot of the kingdoms, West Africa and Central Africa. And so when the author is talking about the Kingdom of Loango, he says this: the ground of it takes as much in compass as our famous city of York in England, but is much more widely built. It has large, straight, and broad streets, of which the inhabitants take great care that no grass grow nor soil lie in them. They are very regular and neatly planted with palmetto trees, bananas, and bacoros, which stand in a line. Some of those trees are also behind the houses and sometimes quite around them, and thus serve both for shelter and for ornament. So we see that the Kingdom of Loango, and especially its city, was well built. It was a beautiful city. It was maintained way back when. So we were not swinging from any tree. We were not swinging from tree to tree. We were busy taking care of our kingdoms until the colonizers came via trade, via their religion, and our kingdoms declined. He says further, in the midst of the city is a great marketplace, and on one side of it, the king's court, surrounded with a hedge of palm trees, containing in circuit as much ground as some ordinary towns, beautified with many houses for his women, of which he, the king, is reported to keep 7,000, that live 6 or 8 together, not daring to stir from their appointed station without the king's leave, or the overseer who keeps a diligent and jealous eye over them. So it says here in another page that the inhabitants of the Kingdom of Loango are a quiet people, averse from wars, and for their courage well beloved by their king, and surpassing all their neighbors in rich commodities. Yet their chief maintenance is drawn from pasturage and hunting. Matombe trees grow numerously, but yet exceeded by the vast multitude of palm trees. These matombes afford first very good wine, which they drink instead of that of palm, but not so strong. The branches make rafters and laths for houses and couches to sleep on. The leaves are used instead of tiles and fence off the greatest of rains. All the garments worn in Loango, the author continues, are made of these leaves, which they use instead of money. Hogs, sheep, goats, cows, and all sorts of foals breed more plentifully here than in any other place on the coasts of Congo and Angola. The men wear long garments reaching from their middle down to their feet and below bordered with fringes, but leave the upper part of their body naked. Let me see what else I got. So what I deduced was that in the Kingdom of Loango there were different types of clothes that people would wear. There were some clothes that the elite would wear, and there were also clothes that the normal, ordinary people would wear, because he says the two other sorts of clothes are for the common people, being plain without images or figures, yet have their distinctions, one being closer and firmer wrought than the other. These are often flashed or pinked from the middle to the knees, as old-fashioned Spanish breeches were worn, with small and great cuts. On their legs they put brass, copper or iron rings about the bigness of the small end of a tobacco pipe, or else they trim them with black and white beads. There are many handicrafts among them, as weavers, smiths, carpenters, cap makers, potters, bead makers, fishermen, canoe makers, merchants, and other traders. This was a busy kingdom. People were going about their business, using their talents and enriching themselves as they enriched the kingdom. The commodities brought out of this country by the whites are elephants, teeth, copper, tin, lead, iron, and other great things. The king of Loango has a reputation of a potent lord, being able to bring numerous armies into the field, as though not so much respected as dreaded by the kings of Kalongo and Goe. Yet he lives in friendship with them and holds good correspondence with those of Angola. Yes, so that was the information that I got about the kingdom of Loango. And so, Afrocentric ones, let us be encouraged that we have a rich history. We are only beginning to scratch the surface. Like, we have only scratched like probably 1 to 5% of the rich history that belongs to our great continent, and I believe that more is going to be revealed, and it's an exciting time to be alive. See you in the next